Good morning, everybody. Sorry, I was back in wardrobe, hair and makeup, so my bad. How you guys doing this morning? How many of you hate to wait? You hate to wait, huh? Now, I did that on purpose because the point is we all hate to wait. How many of you guys hate things like waiting for the water to boil, Or how many of you are the type of people that cannot wait for the entire coffee pot to fill up before you take it out and get something to drink, all right? How many of you hate traffic, like going down Chinden, Meridian Road at 5 o'clock, okay? And hate being at airports or, riding or on an airplane. It's just not very much fun. How many of you, okay, I'm going to create a little bit of trouble here, but how many of you wait on your spouse quite often? Anybody here? Okay, all right. Now, a little transparent here for a second. My wife and I's philosophy of time is a little different, okay? I believe that if you're on time, you're late. She believes if you're on time, you're early. And maybe your marriage is kind of like that too. I waited 21 years to marry the most perfect woman in the world, and I did. I was very blessed. But for the past 18 years after that, I seem like I wait a whole lot, okay? Like, we're going somewhere, and I'm downstairs with my shoes on, ready to go, and guess what? Heather's upstairs doing who knows what with a hair dryer and all this noise going on. I mean, I just don't get it. Still after 18 years of marriage. All right, here's another thing. We go shopping sometimes, and I have to wait on her. One time, I had to wait for 45 minutes at Dillard's for her just to try on some boots, okay? And she didn't even buy them. We went out. I mean, I guess that's a blessing in disguise. Now, I've kind of found this formula. Don't tell her, she's not here right now. But I found out that a little trick that if I tell her that we're leaving 5 or 10 minutes earlier than we actually need to, it helps a little bit, all right? It still doesn't quite work, but we wait. And I love her, and I would never want to change that. I love her the way she is. She's my yin to my yang. She's my pot to my tart. She's my rainbow to my skittle. Man, she's my yao to my ming. So I would never want to change that, but none of us really like to wait, do we? And today we're going to talk about what do we do when God makes us wait. Maybe you're experiencing that right now. There's something going on in your life. It's difficult and it's hard. And you've asked God, please do something about this. And you wait. And you wait. Maybe you feel like me sometimes where you say, God, why don't you just do something about this? God, why aren't you doing something about this? It could be something, of selling your house. You're trying to sell your house. God, why don't you take care of this for me? Or maybe you're struggling with your job and you need a different job, or you need a job, period, to help with your finances. Maybe you ask God to help your marriage to get back on track. Maybe it's a child coming around and being where they're supposed to be. We all struggle with this at different times, where we ask God for something and it feels like he's delaying or we're waiting on him. Here's the key thought for us this morning. Here's the key thought. When we are delayed by God, we are developed for God. Now get this for a second. When we're delayed by God, not by ourselves, not by our own issues, not by Satan or the circumstances that are around us, when we're delayed by God, we're developed for God, for his plans, for his purposes, for his desires, for his goals for our life. And so this morning, we're looking at this concept of when God makes us wait. So if you guys want to turn to John chapter 11, and we're gonna continue on in this series of Meet the Master, and we're gonna be looking at John chapter 11, and this is an amazing story. I've been so excited about talking about it. And what I want to do is give you a little bit of context before we jump into the passage this morning and kind of just explain to you what is going on. So last week, Keith ended with chapter 10, and in verse 40, it kind of gives a little bit of details of what's happening here. Jesus and his disciples, because of being persecuted, because of being threatened to be killed, they take off from Jerusalem and they head up to a town close to Perea. Verse 40 tells us it's across the Jordan, somewhere around where John the Baptist was baptizing. And many scholars think it was Perea. Now, we have a map here. If you look up to the right, we have this this town of Perea. It's in the yellow. And this town is about 20 or 30 miles away from Jerusalem. Jerusalem is where the Jewish leaders are that want to kill and destroy Jesus. And then 2 miles away from Jerusalem in the green is a town called Bethany. Now this is very important for our story today. So kind of get a mental picture of this map because you got to understand the distances between these cities as we look at verse 1 this morning. So John chapter 11 verse 1 says, "Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill." Now, John begins to describe who this family is: Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And he brings into verse 2 the story of Mary when she breaks this perfume, this very expensive perfume, and wipes it on Jesus' feet, and then takes her hair and begins to wipe her hair all over his feet. Now, what's interesting about this is this story hasn't actually been told yet in the book of John. It's not found until in the next chapter, in chapter 12. And so the question is, why would John bring this up right now? As if the original readers are reading this, they're understanding, oh yeah, Mary, the one who threw the perfume all over Jesus' feet. I get it. Why would he talk about this right now? And I think the purpose of this is that John is trying to explain the relationship between Jesus and Mary and Martha. And this was the most intense thing that he could talk about to show how much they love one another, that they were very close. They had a relationship. Jesus loved them and they loved Jesus. They were not strangers, okay? So verse 3. So the sisters sent to him. So the sisters, Mary and Martha, sent to Jesus a messenger. So they sent this messenger from Bethany all the way up to this town of Perea where they're at. They say, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." Now that word love is really important. I want us to check it out for a second. From the Greek word, it comes the word phileo. Now, when we talk about love, it can mean a lot of different things. Be like, I love basketball. Or it means a lot different than if I say, I love my wife, right? But in the Bible, in the Greek, they had different words that had a different description of what love meant. And this particular word here, phileo, means to have an affection, a sentiment, a passion. It was more of a brotherly type of love, a friendship. And so Mary here is explaining the love to Jesus, and she has an expectation. She's like, Jesus, this man, Lazarus, is your friend. You love him. He's not just some stranger. See, Jesus healed all kinds of people. I mean, he walked down the street, and he saw a blind man on the side of the road, and what did he do? He healed him. He didn't know him. Somebody in the crowd reached out and touched Jesus' garment, and Jesus heals them. And so Mary has this expectation. She's like, Jesus, if you heal these blind, or you heal the blind man, you heal these people that you don't even know, surely you will heal my brother whom you are friends with, who you have a relationship. Jesus, we're tight. Jesus, you've been to our home before. Jesus, we were in the same community group together. Jesus, remember when we signed up on the bulletin and we put it in the offering basket towards the end? Okay, maybe she didn't go that far. But she's like, Jesus, we're tight. We're close. And she has this expectation on Jesus. Maybe you're kind of like this. You're like, yeah, I'm close to God. And you've prayed and you asked God for something. You're like, I'm close. God, we're tight. God, I go to church on Sundays. I'm a Christian. I listen to good music. For heaven's sake, I work in our kids in the 2-year-olds ministry. If anything should count, that should count. God, come on. And you pray and you wait. And oftentimes, we don't hear anything. And we have to remember that when we are delayed by God, we're developed for God. Now this morning, you might be here and you've asked God for something, and you're waiting. You're in this waiting period. And so what I want to talk about for the rest of the time this morning is talk about 2 different things that we need to remember while we go through this waiting period. 2 different things. Here's the first thing is this, that God's delays are not necessarily God's denials. God's delays aren't necessarily God's denials. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that it won't. Now, let me be kind of clear here for a second. There are times where God will say no to us. There are moments where we'll ask God for something, and he'll say no. Sometimes they're good things that we ask, and sometimes they're crazy things. Like, God, I want to be a millionaire. He's not necessarily going to answer that. Or, God, I want to look like The Rock, and I don't want to work out, right? And he might say no to that. But there are times where God will say or make us wait, but it doesn't mean he's saying no yet. Check this out, verse 4. When Jesus heard it, okay, so they said that his friend is ill, Lazarus is ill. And when Jesus hears this, he says to the messenger, this illness does not lead to death. It is for the what? Say that with me. Glory of God. So that the Son of God may be what? Glorified through it. Jesus says, look, I know exactly what's going on. I know what's happening. And I'm in control. And whatever happens out of this situation, I will be glorified through it. Whatever takes place in this tragedy or this trial in your life, even though you don't want it to happen, I'm still going to get the glory for it. And then he goes on and explains it a little further in verse 5. He says, now Jesus, here it says it again, loved Martha. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So, now anytime we see the word so or we see the word therefore, get ready, something's coming that we really need to know about. Jesus loved Martha and his sister Lazarus, so when he heard that Lazarus was ill, this was his response. He stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. What? What? Jesus, why would you do this? You have the ability to heal your friend. You don't even have to go anywhere, and you can take care of this just by speaking. And you're going to wait 2 days longer? I don't understand. Why would he do this? Now, what's interesting, this word love here, remember the first word love is phileo. This word love is a different Greek word. It comes from the word agape. And this word is to choose to seek the best for others. It's kind of like a sacrificial love. It's one of the strongest types of love anyone could have for someone else. And so Jesus is saying, look, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, I love you so much. I want the best for you in such a way that I'm actually going to deny your request right now, and I'm going to wait 2 more days. It just doesn't make sense. I'm going to take it a little further. So this is crazy. In verse 39 of chapter 11, which we'll talk about next week, we find out that by the time that Jesus gets from where he's at to Bethany, Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. Now let's do the math. The messenger leaves Bethany and goes to where Jesus is. It's about a 20 to 30 mile walk, so it's about a day's travel. He gets to Jesus. That's 1 day. And then Jesus decides to wait 2 more days. It's 2 and 3. And then Jesus then goes to Bethany, which is a day travel. It's 4 days. So this is crazy. When the messenger originally comes to Jesus, Lazarus is probably already dead. And Jesus knows this because he's God. And yet he still tells this messenger, this illness will not end in death. This is crazy. So picture this. The messenger, he hears Jesus. This will not end in death. And he's excited. And so he runs back to Bethany and he's like, Mary and Martha, guess what? I met Jesus. This is so awesome. By the way, he's a pretty cool guy. He's got the long hair going. It's pretty sweet. He's pretty awesome. And guess what? He told me this. Lazarus is not going to die. And then Mary and Martha are like, what are you talking about? Lazarus has been dead for an entire day. And here we find a situation where Mary and Martha have the promises of Jesus, but they're stuck in their circumstances. And they have to make a choice. Will they believe in Jesus? Will they believe the promises of Jesus? Or will they stay stuck where they're at? I believe this for us. So often, we pray, and we ask God for something. It's a difficulty, it's a tragedy, it's a trial in our life, and we have the promises of God where it says he loves us, that he will never leave us or forsake us. He cares for us. He is our Father. We have these promises, but then we find ourselves so often stuck in these circumstances. The question is, what are we going to do through that time? Are we going to believe the promises of God? Or are we going to live in the circumstances? Now, in the summertime, my kids and I, we go to the pool. We like to go to the pool. They have a great time. And I don't know if any of you parents have experienced this before, but when our kids get to the pool, especially young ones, they're so excited. They see everybody, and they just want to jump in. But mom and dad, we know better, right? Because we are older, we're experienced, and we want them to wait. So they hate waiting on getting this. You get the sunscreen out and you spray it all over them. I'm like the sunscreen king, okay? I love to lather it up, it's all white underneath the eyes, and they can't stand it. And honestly, I'm like Mr. Pasty White guy, okay? And so I get it. I understand it. I'm Irish. I'm so pasty that when I grew up, my friends would come home from vacation and they would want to compare their skin to mine to make themselves feel better, okay? I'm so pasty white that nobody likes to play ping pong with me because the ball gets lost in my skin, okay? I'm so pasty white that I get called mayonnaise legs, all right? It's difficult, but I understand. It's important, and I've gotten burnt a few times in my life, and it hasn't been good for me, and my kids don't understand it. They don't get that mom and dad know what's best for them, and that sometimes they have to wait to have that protection on them. And some of us this morning, God is making us wait because he wants to use some spiritual sunscreen in our life. And there's some things in our life that we've asked God to do for us, but he's trying to mold us. He's trying to shape us. He's trying to protect us. He's trying to grow us into his image. And he's got something amazing for us. When we are delayed by God, we are developed for God. So that's the first thing to remember. God's delays aren't necessarily God's denials. Here's the second thing that I think is very important for us. God's perspective is always better than our perspective. God's ways are always better than our ways. God's plans are better than our plans. Check this out, verse 7. What happens? So after this, he said to his disciples, "Hey guys, let us go to Judea again." So the disciples said to him, "Rabbi, what are you thinking? The Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and you're going there again?" Like, Jesus, are you crazy? Those guys want to kill you, and you're willing to risk your life for this? This is what Jesus says to them. He says, "Are there not 12 hours in the day?" Like, duh. "If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." So here goes Jesus again with this riddle. Like, what does that even mean? What does that even mean, Jesus? Disciples are like scratching their head, like, what are you talking about? Many scholars have talked about this. What is Jesus talking about? I believe this is what Jesus is saying here. Back in that time, it was a 24-hour period, but the reality is they didn't have electricity. So when it came to nighttime, but they didn't have electric lights outside, they didn't have lights inside. So when it got to nighttime, they pretty much shut down, and they were done. And I believe Jesus was saying this to them. Look, guys, in my ministry, in my life, it's still daytime. It's not my time quite yet. It's coming. But until then, we're okay. And we can go down to Jerusalem, and it's going to be all right. And then he goes on and says this, verse 11. He said to them, "Look, guys, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep." He said, "But I go to awaken him." And the disciples, this is kind of funny, said to him, "Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he will recover." Now, Jesus had spoke of his death, but they thought he meant taking rest and sleep. This is hilarious. Jesus then told them plainly, "Guys, look, Lazarus is dead. Lazarus is dead. You got to speak clearly to these guys. And sometimes when I read, I go through life and I feel like I don't have it all figured out. I read something like this and I don't feel as bad. But this is the point here, the perspective. Verse 15. Jesus says, look, Lazarus has died, and for your sake, I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. God said, for your sake, I'm glad that I wasn't there. For your sake, I'm glad that Lazarus actually died. Why? Why would Jesus say this? Jesus said this because he knew that what was about ready to happen was going to be amazing. And through about what is going to happen, Jesus was going to get the glory for it. Through Lazarus' death, the miracle that is going to take place, which you have to come back next week to find out. Through this miracle, God knew that people were going to see this and believe in him. Through this miracle, the disciples, the family, you and I today will see it and ultimately see the glory of God through it all. See, that's the view from the air. But the view from the land, the view that we appreciate and love, is that Jesus says, because of what will happen, you will believe. And sometimes, God does things in our life that we don't understand, that are difficult, that are hard, for the sole purpose of him getting the glory and for us to believe. Now, if you've been around here for a time, you've heard my wife and I's story about our children, but I wanted to share a little kind of different slant on it this morning and kind of share with you a little bit more about our journey. So my wife and I were married about 5-6 years, and we decided not to have children until then, and then we decided to start trying to have children. And so we went through infertility, and it was hard. It was difficult. And maybe some of you are experiencing that right now as a wife, and you want a child, and it's hard. It was difficult for my wife. And God kind of shut the door on us having our own birth children and kind of took us down the road of adoption. And so we're like, okay, God, we surrender to this. This is what you want us to do, and so we'll do it. And so we did our home study, and we went through the process. It was like a year-long process, going to classes, and it was difficult. And it came time for us to start looking at children. And so we received different referrals of different children. And one day we received this referral from this sibling group because we wanted to adopt a sibling group. And it was these two little girls. Their names were Kiana and Rose. They're like 2 and 4 years old. And we got their picture and we're like, yes. Those are the children we're supposed to have. And so we put our home study in, and hundreds of families put their referrals in as well. And they began going through the process, and they whittled it down to 3 families. And we were one of the 3 families. And so we were so excited. These beautiful little girls were going to hopefully be their parents. So we started talking to the foster parents. We started talking to their teachers, started talking to the caseworkers. And all of them were like, man, you guys are such a great family, perfect for this situation. Man, we were so excited. And then they whittled it down to 2 families. Us and another family. And again, the caseworkers were like, yeah, this is so awesome. This is so amazing. You guys are perfect for these little girls. And so our hearts were set on it. My wife even was looking to switch her job because it was going to be a better fit for one of the little girls. And so the day had come, and we were going to receive the phone call. We were excited and hopeful. And they call us. And the answer was no. And we were broken. My wife was crushed. It was difficult. It was hard. These 2 little girls, like, God, why would you do this to us? All we want to do is love these girls. We can't have children. Why can't you give us children? So my wife was crushed. She went to Oregon to be with her parents. Sometimes you just need your mom, right? She goes up there and spends some time. I finally fly out to Oregon from Ohio is where we were living, and I meet up with her, and we spend some time there and just kind of saddened and mourning. And then it's time to go back to Ohio. We get done there, and we go to the airport in Boise as we're flying back to Ohio. And as we're in the airport, my wife checks her email or something, And all of a sudden, we receive this picture of these other little kids. And I think I have the picture. And that's a picture of our kids. Christopher has a little chocolate on his face somewhere. And God began to melt our heart at that point. And we didn't understand why he told us no. And then he gave us these kids. And he gave us another kid. And we got another kid. I'm like, God, stop. This is enough. Please. Here's the deal. God's perspective is always better than our perspective. Would God still have been good and would have gotten the glory even if he wouldn't have given us those children? Yeah, he would have. He probably would have done something else. And I don't know what you're going through right now. Maybe you're struggling with something hard. Maybe your child is struggling emotionally. You're trying to figure out how to deal with that. Maybe they're being bullied at school. They can't figure their place. And as a parent, you're like, God, please help them. Maybe you're struggling financially, and you're like, God, I just need a better job. I need to provide for my family. God, please do something about this. Maybe you have a friend, a family member. Maybe it's yourself, and you're sick. You have some type of illness, and you're begging, and you're pleading, God, please take this away. Heal my friend. Heal my family member. And you're waiting. All I can guarantee this morning is this, that no matter what happens, no matter how hard it is, God is going to use it for his glory, for his purposes, and his plan. And no matter how hard it is and how difficult it is, he wants to use it to shape you, to shape me, to mold us, to protect us, and to grow us. I love this quote by Max Lucado. It says this: the circumstances that we ask God to change are often the circumstances that change us. So I don't know where you're at this morning. I don't know what your struggle is this morning, but I know this. Mark my words, that he loves you. Not with a phileo type of love, the brotherly love. He loves you with the agape type of love. The sacrificial love, the love that wants the best for you. So whatever you're struggling with, whatever you're going through, know this, that God is a good father. He's a good father. Just like Keith talked about last week. And he knows exactly what you and I need. Here's the deal. You got to come back next week, okay? Because the story's not done. It's not done yet. It's going to get good. He's going to take us through the rest of the passage, and I'm going to encourage you to come. Bring somebody with you, please. Be a great week to bring somebody with you. And know that God loves you. In a moment, we're going to celebrate some baptisms, and we're going to get crazy up in this place. But can we pray? God, thank you for all that you've done, for your love. God, that you are a good, good Father, and you care for us. And although we cannot see the entire picture, Lord, it's like us in the ocean, and we're in a submarine, and we're trying to look up, and we're through the periscope, but we can only see a little section. But God, you see everything, and you know what is good for us. It's who you are. So pray, God, I pray this morning that no matter what we're going through, no matter what our struggles are, we would always look at your promises. We would understand the circumstance, but rely and push into you. God, we love you so much. In Jesus' name.